The movie starts as novelist Jennifer Hills stops by a store to speak to the manager, Earl, who owns Mockingbird Trail, the cabin she's driving to, away from the city for some peace and quiet and to start her next book. They chit-chat a bit and the old man gives her the keys and directions as the cabin sits a long way out of the town, in the middle of nowhere. After driving a few miles more, she stops by the gas station to get some gas and meets local men Stanley and Andy, hanging around and amusing themselves. Then Jennifer asks Johnny, the gas station manager, for more directions to the cabin, and he explains that she missed the right turn and points her to the right way. Johnny then hits on her with some corny lines and she laughs them off, leaving him embarrassed and to be made fun of by his friends, Stanley and Andy. Jennifer makes it to the cabin, unpacks, and starts writing her book, trying to ignore the creaking sounds that bring uncomfortable feelings of being watched. The next morning, she gets back from her morning walk and notices that the plumbing in her bathroom isn't working properly. So she calls the owner of the cabin, who promises to send a plumber. Unfortunately, adding to her frustration, as she hangs up the call, she drops her phone into the toilet, leaving her without a means of communication. After a short wait, Matthew, an intellectually disabled plumber, comes and fixes the plumbing. Jennifer, feeling very excited and grateful, gives Matthew an innocent peck on the cheek that makes him unexpectedly nervous, and he runs off even without taking his payment. Back in town, Johnny, Stanley, Andy, and Matthew hang out and catch up in the woods. Stanley boasts that he has a video of the city girl and shows them revealing videos of Jennifer taken without her knowledge from the night before. They then go on to discuss how she thinks she's better than they are, and about the kiss she gave to Matthew. Johnny then gets annoyed and declares that the only reason a girl like that could come to a place like this on her own is to entice men, and promises Matthew, who was defending Jennifer, that he'll show him how to be with her. That night at the cabin, Jennifer takes a break from writing to have a drink and smoke some marijuana, and then falls asleep on the couch. She wakes up late at night and proceeds to go to bed, but is stopped by strange sounds. She goes out to check what's going on and is scared to find a dead bird on her doorstep. And when she returns, she's horrified to find a selfie of Johnny and his friends on her laptop. Immediately thereafter, Johnny and Stanley come out of their hiding place, and Andy comes down from Jennifer's bedroom upstairs, flaunting her undergarments. The men then scare Matthew, who was standing outside, into joining them. They start taunting her about being alone and force her to drink some alcohol. Jennifer, who's scared out of her mind, apologizes to Johnny for embarrassing him the other day, and begs them, crying, to just please leave her alone, while Matthew sits at the corner, visibly upset by what they're doing to her, and Stanley films the whole ordeal. Stanley tells Matthew to rape Jennifer, but he refuses and stammers as he tells them she likes him, and so he doesn't want to participate. Johnny then gags and chokes her with a gun and leaves her to Andy, who proceeds to do the same. However, Jennifer grabs a bottle near her, hits Andy with it, sprays Stanley with pepper spray, and runs out of the door into the woods by the cabin. She keeps running for a while and runs into Earl, and another man who identifies himself as Sheriff Storch. Jennifer is relieved and tells them what happened and describes the men. The sheriff calms her down, tells Earl to go back, and tells Jennifer she's safe now, as he suspects the transgressor's identity. He then drives her back to the cabin to see what's going on and to sort it out. It's the morning now, and when Jennifer and the sheriff get back to the cabin, they find no one there. The sheriff does a walkthrough and finds the empty bottles and marijuana cigarette, which leads him to believe that Jennifer might not be in a right state of mind. Jennifer tries to convince him otherwise, but the sheriff proceeds to call for backup. He then takes his time frisking her inappropriately. Johnny and his friends reappear and join the sheriff in taunting her. Confused and terrified, Jennifer sobs quietly, begging them to stop and leave her alone. Stanley continues filming while the sheriff sadistically assaults her. Then Johnny threatens Matthew, saying he will stab Jennifer if he doesn't rape her, and so Matthew proceeds to kiss her, but she slaps him away. Jennifer frantically fights to get out of Johnny's grip. Then it needs 3 of the men, including the sheriff, to hold her down for Matthew. The sheriff steps out to take a call from his daughter and sweetly talks to her as Jennifer screams and fights for her life while Matthew rapes her. Then as soon as Matthew gets off of her, she gets up and wanders half-naked outside. However, the monsters are not ready to leave her alone. They follow her and assault her. Stanley keeps the camera rolling as the sheriff brutally sodomizes her, followed by the rest of them taking turns. When it's over, she lays there, barely conscious, and watches them triumphantly discussing her misery. Then she somehow manages to stand and slowly walks away, completely naked and in agony. They follow her onto a bridge, and as the sheriff threatens her with his gun, she jumps off the bridge into the creek below and disappears. The sheriff orders them to go around looking for her, but she's nowhere to be found. He schedules for them to split up and continue the search every day until they find her dead or alive, and orders them to immediately go to the cabin to burn her possessions and scrape her car. The sheriff then breaks Stanley's camera while screaming at him to get rid of the tape of evidence. The next day, Sheriff Storch goes to see Earl at the store to give him the keys to Mockingbird Trail cabin and reports that Jennifer has left. In the coming few days, Johnny and his friends look for Jennifer, and life goes on as if nothing happened for all the men, except Matthew, who keeps replaying what they did to Jennifer in his mind. One evening, Earl calls Sheriff Storch at home and tells him that a friend of Jennifer's has left a message on his machine, saying that no one has seen or spoken to Jennifer in over a month. Earl convinces the sheriff to call back the friend, as he was probably the last person that saw Jennifer. The next day, as Johnny and his friends sit around doing nothing like they do most days, Stanley informs them that his camera with the tape of the rape has gone missing. Johnny freaks out and gets in a fight with Stanley. That night, as Johnny watches TV in his house, he hears strange sounds. He goes to his door to check it out and finds a dead bird on his doorstep. He kicks it away and goes back inside, but it happens again. Then on the third try, instead of a dead bird, he finds Jennifer's slippers from the night of the rape, and Matthew's stress rubbers, which he uses to calm himself when he gets overwhelmed. He panics and shoots blindly, hoping to scare off the perpetrator before he goes back inside. The next day, the sheriff intercepts as his wife tries to play a videotape that was just delivered. He's infuriated, immediately takes back the tape, and rushes to Johnny's house, where he finds Johnny, Andy, and Stanley speculating over what happened at Johnny's house the night before, and surmising that Matthew was probably behind it, as he felt guilty and no one has seen him for days. After hearing the case against Matthew, the sheriff agrees that Matthew might be behind the tape sent to his wife and orders them to find and bring him as soon as possible. Later that day, Sheriff Storch and Earl go quail hunting, and the sheriff shoots the old man in the name of tying up loose ends. As Matthew sits alone by an abandoned house, he hears his name being called from inside and runs in. There he sees Jennifer, who's now a shadow of who she once was, and is relieved to see her alive. He stammers as he apologizes to her, and she calls him to her, telling him it wasn't his fault. He sits next to her and cries with regret, at which point she pulls out a rope and chokes him and knocks him out. Andy and Stanley look for Matthew all over the woods. Then they start hearing a song, follow it to the abandoned house, and separate for better coverage. Jennifer appears in front of Stanley, and as he runs towards her, he's caught by a trap she set that punctures his leg to the bone. Stanley cries out in pain and calls for Andy, who comes running. Jennifer runs behind him, hits both men, and knocks them out. Andy wakes up and finds himself tied and suspended face down from the top of a tub. Just as he tries to make sense of this, Jennifer starts filling the tub with hot water. She then water tortures him, repeating the taunts he said when they did the same thing to her. She then pours lye in the water and puts his face in it. She walks out as he screams from the pain of the lye burning his face off. Jennifer films as she ties Stanley to a tree, pins his eyebrows out with fish hooks, and covers him in fish blood while taunting him as he did with her. She leaves him to die as crows surround him to peck out his eyes. Jennifer then lures Johnny out of the station and knocks him out to take him to the abandoned house. She ties his hands to the roof of the house, spreads his legs, ties them to the floor, and gags him. She then taunts him while pulling his teeth out with pliers. Then she emasculates him and leaves him as he screams and lets him bleed to death. Jennifer goes to Sheriff Storch's family, posing as his young daughter, Chastity's new teacher, when he's at work. His wife calls him and lets Jennifer introduce herself over the phone. He's shocked and rushes over to his house, but when he gets there, his wife tells him that the new teacher has taken Chastity to the local park. He drives to the park and looks for Jennifer and Chastity but can't find them. As he hopelessly returns to his car, Jennifer hits him from the back seat and knocks him out. He comes to and finds himself tied and bent over a table and sodomized with a shotgun. She taunts him and tells him that she was as innocent as his daughter is. She then placed the knocked out Matthew directly in front of the sheriff and ties the trigger of the shotgun to Matthew's hand. Matthew awakens by the sheriff's scream. He's shocked to see the sheriff bleeding in front of him, and as he moves to help him, the shotgun goes off through the sheriff and kills them both. Jennifer walks out, sits, and listens to the sound of the gun with a wry smile on her face. And with that, the movie ends.